Of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 59. Sanar contemplated the state of being disarmed by a master of the game. There was a small drill sanctuary for prayer in the hospital, thoughtfully warmer, drier, and quieter than the corridors and public spaces intended for Taurians. He found himself there often, as he despised hospital rooms and the distractions of constant movement and noise. This small room had glowstone, sand, and the walls draped in shimmering fabric. He must analyze the state of being disarmed. He must analyze the mastery. He must analyze the game. He must analyze his next move. He chose a glowstone, swirled his fingers in the surface of the sand table to create a depression for it to rest in. Its place in the sand, determined for the brief moments granted him to choose it himself. A reminder that time passes, dunes accumulate and blow away, and meditation is a controlled space where larger concepts can be writ small in sand, symbols contemplated. An illusory moment, but one of created memory and intent. In essence, sympathetic magic. Potentially through ritual, a small human woman deciphered. In practical terms, a place of refuge and peace where he would not open his mouth and spill unrefined truth. It was traditional to draw with the fingertips a symbolic representation of what concerned him in the cast light of the stone, but he would not draw a small human woman to be puzzled over by the next visitor. Possibly Yosed. He imagined Yosed feeling conflicted over the heresy of it, but rubbing out the figure with a furtive palm, saying in his pained, embarrassed tone, "Really, Dad?" It made him smile. Somehow, yes, really, Dad. He contemplated the nature of his concerns, drew the outline of a drill hand with palm upturned. Not human. Symbolic enough, fused fingers. Palms upturned was a traditional pose for prayer and meditation. The pledge of wrist binding condensed from the whirling chaos of his thoughts, brought forth by the image of an open palm. Comforting, in that he was capable of coherent thought, condemning in the content of that thought. The memory was of the moment of the vow he had taken with Erica, the vow he had failed to keep. What you once held tight in your own fist will belong to us, held together in our devoted, bound hands, and no trial shall be so great that we cannot hold it between us, shared. The memory of Simphe bark incense and glowstone, and Erica's beautiful face. He searched his memory for what he had thought of those words then. It had been an empty metaphor, as imaginary as saying that wings would sprout from their backs and give them the power of flight. To his state of mind, the vow was composed of flourished and faulty language, but he could not have her without saying such things in ritualized form. He had believed he understood ritualized form. Perhaps, unfortunately, he had too well, negating the symbolic content and carrying out ritual and form in battle sleep. Always battle sleep, even as he assured himself he was awake. He pondered for a moment the paradox of dreams distracting one away from the realization that the absurd circumstances must of course mean one was dreaming. His training had provided the foundation of ritual, deep thought and practice, devotion and intellectual content until that fell away and was replaced with him as a conduit. a sacred channel for invoked forces, but those forces were polished lies and violence, never the gods. His ideal had been thoughtless completion of action with preparation such that the channel was preordained through observation and preparation and could go no other way. He wondered if the Hanar had not decided to rescue the Drell until they had discovered that they had a doctrine of dissociation from responsibility written into their psyches, at which point they became of use. They had destroyed their own planet, they felt no responsibility. They could destroy individuals nicely. What did that say about the absurd circumstances he found himself in? What did that say about his vows taken unless those vows were geared toward the ability to kill? Looking at Eureka, gazing at her beauty and promise, as they faced each other on their knees, he had made only one vow that he validated with what he knew he could provide. I will kill anyone that hurts you. A vow he had not spoken aloud. And so he had not only killed, harmed, pained, tortured. He had not succeeded in killing all those that hurt her. Not himself. He had tried. He had harmed, pained, and tortured himself, had hoped for, chased, and even begged in his prideful way for the gods to grant him death. But he had to earn it, and the gods were closer to Eureka than he was, and he relied upon their judgment. Disarmed. Open palm. No trial shall be so great. He could not yet speak to Eureka again, still sundered. Perhaps he would hear her again if he walked leagues of dry penance. How many leagues? How dry? Which penance to carry through each footstep? He had many choices in proposed penance, in defiance of penance, and unfortunately felt he would complain to his dead wife about being unable to possess another woman he not only wanted, but deserved, and had been promised. Eureka would perhaps understand. He did not wish to require her understanding on such a point. Disarmed, he still had two hands, hands he valued more as closed fists, hands that even if in open prayer pose, would close to fists as soon as trial was placed in them, and he would seek that trial if it was not granted by fate. So his open palms had always been weapons, promised to the Hanar or given in silent and unwanted vow to his wristband, because it was the only use he could find in them. His open palms were of value upon Eureka's skin, but with her heart placed there, they closed to fists because they knew no other way to be of value in the greater galaxy. Eureka had altered his nature. That he knew. Not enough to show to any person who did not know him before her eyes met his through his scope. Not enough to make him whole, but enough to make him something. Something rather than nothing. Placed in mathematical terms, he had been a cipher, zero, calculated and cunning, and she had added value. He had beheld love. He had beheld family. He had beheld grace. True and sustained things. True things outside himself, but they were no longer doubted. He did not believe he could achieve them, but he no longer believed they were phantoms and lies. He was the phantom and the lie. But he had an opposite, and he loved her, adored her, marveled over her gifts, their son. Still unable to detach from his detachment analysis and easy lies that he told to comfort and keep her from his knowledge that he amounted to zero added value. He could only subtract. Had he truly not altered her nature as Kara supposed? Her transformation from alive to dead, and the direct line to his responsibility clouded his attempt at grasping her forgiveness in open palms when there was so much blood and hatred there. Kara had not asked him to change his nature. She had only asked that he be worthy of trust, and admitted where he was trustworthy. Kara had rearranged the board. He had been hijacked to guard what he sought to plunder. Trusted. It was, as always in her, the riskiest and potentially most loss-heavy path to take, the only path she could take to secure his presence and obedience. He could reject that role, reject her proposed trust as the obvious manipulation tactic he called it. But that was what she had done. Named her vulnerability, named her need, named him as guardian. If he rejected that, he rejected her, and in her disappointment, she had the right to reject him, and they both knew it. Gift giving could be seen two ways: giving someone what they believed was desired, needed, or wanted, or socially encoded messages as symbolic as the sand table images. Sympathetic magic made real. A greater gift given than could be reciprocated was often a sign of social dominance, of debt, of pointing out differential in potential and status. His Lassam knew this, and with her there was always the encoded message and the debt. It was traditional between them, unspoken and entwined as they were forced to be, as he forced them to be. So with Kara it would be all those things. Her approval of worthiness, her assertion of trust, her encoded message, rejection of the state of war, offer of truce with a balance of power between them, roles redefined again. Lassam, I salute your gift and trial, placed in disarmed palms, with me unable to drop your gift or put it down, because you challenged me to carry your trust carefully in both hands and protect it from what usually dwells there. No trial shall be so great that we cannot hold it between us, shared. A trial in the form of a Taurian bondmate, a trial in the form of a disappointed yet exalted son, a trial in the form of a woman that he could not strike at with his fists and could not hold in his open palms, a trial in the form of a man who knew patience was the only path to his goal, yet grew impatient with all the tricks and trials that went into generating his form of patience. What was the game? Her home board, her strength, was always defiance. His home board, his strength, was always patience. Framed that way, her move came into sharp relief and on the correct board of interaction. She had defied his nature and his intent by giving her trust and heart, denying him her body by ordering him to follow her, hug her, as she promised a picnic as consolation. If he suspected a finger-span's length of her playing him, just a shade more, intent to line him up with other Drell dolls and have a tea party, it made him want to laugh, and it made his hands tighten into a more comfortable position. Fists. Not in the sense that he wished to hit her, but in the sense that he was not entirely certain he wouldn't line up with the other dolls for the pleasure of her company. What were his options? Be alone with his fists or be with her, bearing palms full of her trust and unspoken conditions, because those conditions had already been spoken, and Drell never forgot. If Vakarian wondered if she feared Senar's advances, she'd say no. She would not be lying. She had more than enough defiance, whimsy, and creative stamina to stall him forever, as he explained the carving of Drell fruit, as she spoke to a Geth prophet, as he was unable to watch her sleep, as he had grown accustomed to doing. To have that right taken from him by her bondmate, who had ironically learned from Senar's actions that Kara forgave those she loved their trespasses, when those trespasses had practical answers to problems she could not solve herself. When those that loved her gave her what she could not ask for, could not accept as her idea, because those gifts delivered to her something selfish in herself she would not honor but would not deny. As every moment she spent of her life was clothed in whimsy, and he was permitted to see it. As the Geth prophet wished to be there, as Garrus had no bar to the cabin door or her body, as Senar waited with his patience that was as much a part of him as her whimsy and ruthlessness were parts of her, and need not be manufactured for his sake, as she had them in abundance, with finger sandwiches and discussions of cookies, and how to annihilate reapers. Charm from her left palm and eradication from her right. He would be there for that, every moment of that, charmed as the Turian, Geth, Solarian, human, Asari, even Krogan. He closed his eyes. Damn her. Truly damn her, and then bless her doubly. That seemed to be the pattern he could not escape, the rebound of attempting to condemn her to the hard and the cold, failing to affect her as he wished, while fruit salad was what was in her heart. Had he not known Erica's grace, he would suspect more deeply that Kara meant to harm him. She did not. Any injury he suffered in her presence was self-inflicted, and he could not blame her. She had offered, asked, tried to order that he leave her, that she would only harm him, as he refused to go. The fascination of Siha had drawn him forward step by step from prayer over Nasana's body to now, inexplicable in its convoluted path. He could not go back to being the man that prayed with spectres waiting upon his notice. The pretense of his final prayer, expecting to die and leave an attractive and enigmatic corpse. It did sound restful in comparison. Did he require rest? He examined that possibility, the potential of distance, and refocusing of his newly minted self. Time to learn that self. Time to prove he was capable of distance, capable of perspective. A potential fate, as though he had come to his senses and conceded the game, taken instead a position dependent upon his personal power and gain. It would be a lie. She might die in the meantime as he waited and plotted, bled off his frustration in self-directed action, and planned return to her life, a new man with his own accomplishments as Spectre, Hanar compact defeated, and personal renown among the Drell assured. It was possible. Her words echoed with exactly the right touches of self-deprecation and humor. I would have to stipulate that you are in fact at least somewhat of a fool, as everything seems to be defined as me, and there's a lot more out there you could gather that isn't as one-track mindy. You are correct, as you so often are, Dralatem. I am in fact, at least, somewhat of a fool. In the spirit of the gamble, I must cut my losses or double down. He was capable of cutting his losses and returning another day. It was a strategy he'd employed often in his career when factors did not align. He could leave Yosset and Kara, create his own missions, spend a week buried in petite human redheads, and move on with his life. Or his death. Cease being at least somewhat of a fool. Wake from dreaming. Play his own game on deliberately uneven ground with people who would lose to him, deserve to lose to his patience, could not counter effectively with defiance, and the fact that he did not wish to strike. He briefly considered the satisfaction of living a life once again where defiance was not an effective counter to his patience, where he knew he was the greatest Paniva player in existence, possibly who ever existed, where Erica was alive and ever welcoming, where Kolyat grew up with both parents whole, where he did not wish to bury himself in petite redheads for a week. At least a week. Sans the things he could do right now with his cock and his frustrated fantasies. He could certainly find and methodically exhaust a bevy of petite redheads, but he did have the dawning concern that none of them would have her eyes, and he would not leave the exercise satisfied but exhausted in different ways, finding in practice that he did not, in fact, accept any substitute and did not wish to touch anyone else. Approximately 7 minutes into his week-long sojourn, he would find himself cold, repelled, and paying the elaborate bill without a qualm as he considered how this would have been managed better had he thought it through. He was more than somewhat of a fool. Did it come to that he was accustomed to being the lead, and now he was the supporting player, the volunteer understudy with all the lines memorized, practiced, no longer using his spare time to think of how to kill the next target, but instead thinking of all the uses he could potentially have for his and her open palms, her hair, and her eyes. He had had absolute faith that Erica would always be there for him as he wished, when he wished, and she was. Until she was not. Assured as an asset, he had not obsessed upon her, but upon his next mission. Kara was his next mission, his only mission. Even she had known that, if they saved the galaxy, he still had more work to do if at that time she did not belong to him. She had defied him, dared him to become impatient, to lose his signature control and lose not only her game, but his game. She had gambled that the challenge framed that way would be as irresistible as she was. She knew full well that his loss of control might result in his self-awareness or in failure of everything she held close to her heart. She needed him, but she was surrounded by the extraordinary, by prophets and speakers for the spirits. He was eclipsed by her, and all she offered was, in fact, being a glorified understudy, bodyguard, and a babysitter. An empty basket. If he told her he must go, she would bravely wish him well, cry, and turn aside. he would discover that it was too late for his pride, too late for his dignity, too late for any goal other than surrender in depths of green, the culmination of Dralatel and his treasured images. If he left her now, as his attention was on his own life and rehabilitation of pride, Vicarian's attention would be on blocking his path of return, distance from Kara, proving Sennar would leave her when she needed him most. She would not allow herself to need him again. Kara would tell him when he wished to return that his mission was too important. Vicarian's will and influence would grow stronger each day. Bond and reverie and shared success creating a waking reality where Manipar was a faded and abandoned dream. She would cut her losses. She would be convinced she had woken from delusion, aided by her bondmate. At the moment, Sennar believed Garrus was responsible entirely for his spectre status. Another gift with its encoded message. Sennar could trade professional status gained for personal attachment grown brittle and losing all living elasticity and hold upon her, crumbling to the dead and darkened past. No, his pride was not worth that loss. He must stay with her, wanted to stay with her, would not leave. That idea set aside as distasteful and counterproductive, analyzed and categorized for its board, its purpose, and its potential for gain or loss. It was a practical plan, and perhaps even wise, to establish himself, gain his own power base, and fight his own way. But it appeared pride no longer drove his choices. She did. He had declared war. She had declared truce. He had needed war because he needed surrender. She would not be at war, nothing for him to push against, her immune to temptation, him drawn to undimmed green. Now with open palms itching with need from the ground he'd gained, the promise given of Manipar. And once her fight was done, she would no longer need him. That he examined for truth and lies, self-deception and utility. Kara would always love, always want Sennar. Yet she would not always be able to afford him when her will was diluted. As she had stated under Venom Blur, she wished to give Garrus all he desired once her fight was done. Garrus desired that Sennar no longer pursued and strained the kind-heartedness of his bondmate. If she died before Sennar became her reason to live, he would want to kill her himself. It was a fantasy that lasted the flash of his temper until his hands were on her, always securing her, never hurting her, always ending in moans and screams that did not resemble pain of any sort. That he examined for depth and breadth and the aspect of illusion. Did he want her because she was denied? Without a doubt. Once granted, would she be shorn of depth, breadth, and illusion? Would she return to his first impression of a completely unremarkable, nondescript human female who would not catch his attention if she passed him on a walkway? That occupied him with analysis of his ignorance, knowledge, and delusion, and the blend of each. Here, his nature was incontrovertible and would determine that outcome overwhelmingly. He knew the paths to pain and pleasure. through force of his training, force of his experience, and force of his venom. It was impossible to imagine a circumstance where she would not want him once his hands and mouth were on her body, thoughts and whispers in her ears and mind. If he were to consider game boards other than defiance and patience, love and trust belonged to her, and those things she might teach him. Lust belonged to him. Once the shadow of her footstep moved toward that board, she was lost. She would be his. He was unable to fathom what touching her could bring in negative result, trying to force himself to consider worst case. This brought him blank patches of the inability to conceive of bad sex in terms of her, in terms of him, in terms of the fact that he never had, never would, fail to evoke physical pleasure or inspire others to bring it out in him. That was in truth not a concern. Her heart pounded, and her breath caught when she was near him, and she did not, would not deny that she wanted him, and for excellent reasons. She had never challenged him on the subject of lust, ticklish and nervous and intimidated in his presence. Again, for excellent reasons. She would not challenge him there, would leave that board to him, and to the treasured but imaginary future where she would be free to allow even her shadow to venture there. She would never propose an affair, propose stolen moments, play on that board with any pretense of victory. Unfortunately, her lack of blunders, presence of humility, and clear analysis of her own abilities and his, admiring his gambits while evading or disarming them, proved to him that she knew what she was doing. It occurred to him that with the end of his brief war that had lasted less than an hour, he would tell Yused that he must remain on Palavin, and that was Senar's wish and will. He would not make her do it. And he must secure a basket. The solution to his problem of red heads, without sufficiently inspiring green eyes, occurred to his mind, which produced a searing image. Kara's face, blindfolded, with her licking at her lips, slick with his venom. Not a child, but childlike. Not innocent, but potential layers of flawless deceit. Slippery and slick as her lips, laughter and disarming whimsy or calculation with the authority of gravity. Accustomed to the tailored deep call of reverie and unquestioned devotion. Accustomed to her delicate fingertips able to caress all the information and power she needed from the data stored that she knew how to reach legally and illegally, able to point or whisper, and the loyal killed for her or died for her. And what did he have to offer this rapt, expectant woman? It surged, and he knew it was true. Knew she knew it was true. He loved her. He would never willingly leave her. He would wait for her shadow and her light to venture onto his board of her own will. This woman cannot be taken. She must be earned. She must be given. He wanted nothing more than her. Not his own status, not his own pride, not his own path. Ask the man who stood over Nasana Dantius's body with sharp and hard pride and suicidal intent. Would he give up his pride for this Siha? No, he had not given up his pride for Erica. Ask himself now. She did not demand his pride. She demanded his patience. He was the one demanding that it would cost him his pride. With that, he would no doubt give his pride, freely packed in a basket beside Deviantart's. As for gods or anyone else knowing, if Kara knew that Sennar Tualan could be ordered to live or die, ordered to sit or stand, stay or leave, and could not be ordered to not love her, that secret would be held in her heart, never to be stolen by another. She would ensure that all knew he was valued, loved, worthy of fear and praise, invaluable, because she was who she was, would know how to hold that carefully in her open palms for all to see. The man who stood over Nasana's dead body and prayed to silent gods because it made other people believe that gods listened to him, lifted his eyes to see not a Siha, but himself now, on the Turian home world and capital city, his son alive, bearing his birth name as Spectre, having defeated collectors and experiencing clear lungs granted by Commander Shepard, the Turian counselor, and his son. And he hated himself. He hated the depth of delusion piled upon the burden of unrequited but still granted love, and pride of place at a picnic on the Normandy. And he smiled, acknowledged his own hatred of his entitled being, though he must have learned some compassion from Erica, from Kara. He understood that man, understood his hatred, acknowledged his judgment and his place in time. But Kara was worthy of love, worthy of his pain, worthy of his patience. He had so often considered the moments of death in his existence to be the only ones with meaning. She knew he would die for her. She would know that he would live for her and live well. It may not be the will of the sand, yet it was his will. And the sand would do as it always did, and he could not tell which way the dunes would form. Just as he knew that he would read each moment in a fight, find his target, pull his path from the chaos, he would read each moment with her, find his goal, pull his path from her chaos. It would always be a good day to die, or a good day to live. There would be a moment of truth, and he would find it if he walked at her side. There was a moment in all planning, a moment where potential tipped from unknown chaos to known and even inevitable order. He experienced that peace, the blessing of his confidence in each measured step taken. Perhaps it was love, inevitable that steps taken at her side in her presence would be the most valued steps he could take. So be it. Tradition was to leave the stone in place to illuminate the symbol. It would be watched and preserved, swept away by a keeper of the sands in a week. Even here, likely an itinerant drill cleric making a circuit of blessed and swept sand tables like this throughout Cipertune. Instead, he removed the stone, brushed the sand from it carefully, replaced it alongside its neutral, illuminating kin, and erased both the impression of the stone and the stylized image of a drill hand, replacing it with the impression of his open palm, pressed into the sand instead. Unlit and unheralded, literal and specific, not a symbol, but a vow. Reality no longer in question. He would not cut his losses. He had no losses. He had gains. He had a sacred maybe from the mouth of a woman who knew better than to promise what she could not give, and knew better than to deny what it was she wanted, in order to not provoke him into proving it to her. No trial shall be so great that we cannot hold it between us, shared. He supposed he should be proud of himself for not leaving a tracing of an obvious Turian form with several knife wounds in specific spots. But he liked Garrus. He did not wish to admit that, but he believed Kara and Garrus and Yosed all knew it, and would not force those words from him. Sennar gathered thoughts and strategies, sat beside Yosed as he slept. He wished to lie. He wished to work venom into his son's skin so he would be more cooperative. He kept his hands in his lap and tried to hold off his acrobatic imagination from spinning a clear story with a pithy value to be learned. He often only needed seconds to solidify the bones of a lie that would sell itself with the whole cloth he spun to drape the form. He was still and would always be proud of that, a skill born from the nature of his mind, expertise hard won and well practiced. To counter the urge to tell one grand and smooth lie, he would tell several contradictory truths. When Yosed woke, he told him, "I know you do not wish to hear it, and I do not wish to say it. I do not wish for you to be on board the Normandy when she leaves Palaven. I would like to be a prophet and say that I know the truth, that I know the future, that I know what is best. The only things I can attempt to decide are what is best for me, and also what is best for you based on what I know of the worlds. Had I wished you to be like me, I would have trained you to be like me from age 6. Had I believed my way of seeing the world was the best way to see the world, I would never have fallen in love with your mother. I knew when you were born that I was not right with the worlds, or even right in the worlds. They might be better places were I removed from them, except she told me she loved me, and your life told me you needed me. You and your mother were my better. And knowing who I was, I tried to keep you in that better state, to not have to see or know what I was, who I was, what I did. This is not to say I am not proud of who I am. I am proud. I am not better. So believe me when I tell you, when my life tells you and my choices throughout my life show, I wished for you to have better, to be better than I. Through those choices, your mother was murdered. You were abandoned. I sit at your side knowing that I owe you, not only as your father, but as a spirit, and as any story of justice might tell, I should somehow restore to you all the years of abandonment and loss, redeem them, and we would be right with each other. I should change and do things your way. I should learn a different way from the way that guided my life with you. It would be a great temptation to give you the wish of your heart, an adventure, close to family and dearly loved ones, the riches of importance and pride. Sennar paused for a moment, reiterations of theme and intent, overwhelming in the simplicity of being a mortal attempting to sort this in a way for sense, knowing he would only create chaos, to allow chaos to speak for itself. I wish to create order for you, and I cannot. There are truths that cannot be spoken that sound trite. The love between a father and a son is strong, is diluted in meaning because obviously many fathers and sons share no love. Perhaps if I were to put that close to another truth and say they were of similar magnitude to our personal experience. Erica Krios was an extraordinary and deeply loved woman, and her loss destroyed the desired paths of the two men that loved her most, both unwilling to leave the spot where her last footprint shadowed the sand. So I wish to give you a new path, new family, new purpose, walk beside you, and I have, and I will, and you must believe that I wish to do so. The Normandy cannot be your new home. I cannot tell you exactly why, except to tell more truths that carry the same weight as the other truths I tell, depths not to be misunderstood or underestimated. Garrus Vakarian was raised in a culture of expectation and fulfillment of purpose in war. He is a product of his people, perhaps the best among them. I was taken from my family to train for war, but this man's family is war. They embody it. He embodies it. This man recalls one day of his life, one day as deeply as you and I recall the day we knew of your mother's death. In the middle of some falsely bright night on the Citadel, Garrus Vakarian received a news alert that Commander Lal Shepard had died, her ship sheared to scrap by an unknown, undetected enemy. She was lost, along with many of her crew. In that moment, the likely truth was that Garrus Vakarian wished to die with her, die for her, blamed himself for leaving her side, wondered why he did not know that leaving her side was the worst choice he had made in his life. He vowed to make better choices. The woman he loved was gone, and he accepted he could not go back, could not stand still, must go forward. He embodied war. He embodied her. He honored his Ava. There is a human woman bearing the name Lal Shepard, who was taken from a family that did not embody war, but embodied peace and knowledge. That peace was violated as blood and bodies were transformed to smoke. She chose to be trained to kill. She chose to embody protection and sacrifice. Every day she hears her parents' voices. She moved forward and not back. She is not a farmer on Mindwar. She expects nobody to restore her childhood to her. She is the only witness to her childhood, to her parents. She lost her ship and her crew and her life on a day like any other. There were no portents or omens, no warnings, no gods intervened. There was no mercy. Her ship was destroyed, her crew left to pods or vacuum, and she sacrificed herself to save her pilot, who would not leave the ship he loved. He would not leave the spot where her last footprint cast a shadow in space. Between these two people, Garrus would have preferred to be there with her, to save her, even if he died. She, no doubt, felt blessed by whatever small mercy was available that he was safe on the Citadel. They would argue about these diametrically opposite mirror-shine truths, no doubt. He wanting to sacrifice himself for her grateful. Her sacrifice did not take him. And if I could take your mother's place. bear the pain she bore, bear the torture, bear the death. That is where I wish my life could have ended. But it did not. What remains is that each person retains in their memory what is not a story but is life, wishes to protect, and give their lives for those they love. There is no limit to that. There is no negotiating with that. You cannot talk to us to change that any more than anybody could talk to you and convince you that perhaps you did not love your mother. So when I tell you these truths, line them up in their depth and breadth, their inherent opposition. Do not underestimate their power. When I tell you that you are my son, and I owe you, wish to give you my love, your lung back, and my leg, your mother back, your childhood pristine and perfect, parents that had spent their days painting and gardening in the sun with no further cares, to the point that you would be bored by us and wonder why your life was not more exciting. Believe me, the Normandy would be exciting. It could be family, it could be adventure, it could be so many things to you, with the people you love, and learning from some of the greatest medical minds in existence. I wish to give you that. I feel it is not within my authority to take it from you if you wish to reach out and convince Commander Shepard of your dream. It is your place and your right to be an inspiration, to have aspirations, to hold the best of the future in your hands. But that is a story. The reality is that each person on that ship is there not to live an adventure or to be with their family, but to die in the line of duty. We became family after the choice to kill and to die. You are our family, but we wish to hold you back from choosing to kill or to die. If we rearrange history, it would make a story. We could take those broken days from ourselves and be fully responsible for them. I could have died in your mother's place, and that would be just and make the world better. I would not permit, nor would your mother permit, that you take her place. Ever. We would both die because that is our job as your parents, to protect you, to care for you. Something I failed to do. I do not wish for you to become me. I did not raise you to kill. I did not raise you to suffer. I did not raise you to trade your soul for the gifts elegant violence brings. I do and did know better, and I still do. I am proud of that you are you and are not me. You are not her. You are a man who has made adult choices, and here I must ask you to consider Shepard and Garrus and that day that haunts them both. You convince her to allow you on the Normandy, and one day, an ordinary day with no warning, no omen, and no mercy, her ship with her family on it is attacked. On that ship are scores of people who volunteered to die in the line of duty, and one young Drell man with promise, love, ambition, and intelligence. A young man she loved so dearly she could not tell him no. Perhaps she lives. Perhaps she dies because I went to you and not to her. Perhaps her order that I go to you means both you and I die, and she ordered that it be so. Perhaps she orders me to find you, protect you, and Garrus dies protecting her. Perhaps we all live. What we all know from our personal responsibility for our worst days. But you do not, though you wish to be a peer, wish to be family, and count it as equal. Is that your death? would bear the highest cost for every one and the deepest well of regret. Perhaps I live, you do not, and I enter battle sleep and never wake, because I traded what I knew was best for you, what was best for me, for adventure and what I owe you. Perhaps I die on my way to you, and you live, and you regret being there at all. I am certain this would be the perfect time for me to realize love conquers all, and if we stay together, everything will work. But that is not how the stories of the people concerned go. That is not what I taught you. That is not what I wish to teach you. Love can be conquered. Love must be protected. Death must not be dared by those who do not have clear in their minds that the result of their dare will result in death eventually, once enough dares are sought. I made the choice that you might hate me for protecting you, but that did not relieve me of the responsibility for protecting you. I am your father, and I am an ice-bladed killer who has brought death to people with promise, love, ambition, and intelligence with no omen or mercy. That can somehow be true at the same time that I love you, and I want better for you, and I can only prove it by my absence. I cannot change who I am. You do not yet know who you are. You can yet be better. You do not owe that to me. You owe it to yourself. You can prove that you understand by realizing you can learn medicine on Palaven. You can set aside your adventure as an adult. You can make your sacrifice knowingly. Know what you lost and what you will miss every day, as I missed your youth. Choose to protect yourself to serve greater good, regardless of the dare and the risk you wish to rise to in order to prove your valor. We do not want your valor. We, in truth, want your continued life above all things. If we die, you know that your life, your future, your potential is what all of us on that ship fight to protect. It is not because you are inexperienced or unwanted, and it was never that. It is because you are of infinite value to those that love you. You have more life ahead of you and the promise of better that you can bear for us. You are our hope. You can choose healing, and you can heal from anywhere. We must choose fighting, and we must fight from one place, one extraordinarily dangerous place. I do not know if Palaven will be attacked and you killed, but I do know that if that happens, all involved will still know you had the best chance of survival of all of us. And stories have brutal endings when those stories are truth. You can make it a chosen cost of being an adult, of learning certain unspeakable truths, being a bondmate, being a commander, being an assassin, being a father, being a son, without having to die to learn them, without having to die to reinforce the lesson in others. Remain here, Yaset. I beg you. Tears were streaming down both their faces as Yaset tilted his head back and closed his eyes. Oh, yeah, I've discovered heroes are exhausting, and I need to recover and receive therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. Thank you. If you die, I'll want to kill you myself. I should have just said that. That is the moral of the stories, I believe. Please come back. It matters if you say it, if you mean it. I want to stay. I want to come back. I always wanted to be there and to mean it.